In light of Precursors being as of now unwinnable, I'm very quickly shifting gears to talk about the latest entry in a series I know an embarrassing amount about, Sonic Forces. Before we start, however, I like to have some grounding so viewers can understand where I'm coming from, and I've never touched on a Sonic game properly before, so I'm going to give a rundown of my thoughts on each era, and some entries in particular. This will be helpful but not entirely needed in watching my analysis on Forces. It will give you some grounding on my thoughts about the series. In this part of YouTube where things get analysed, there's a whole lot dedicated to think pieces, critiques, histories, and essays on Sonic, and it's not really hard to understand why. He's one of gaming's most recognisable faces, has one of the most clustered and at times weird fandoms, and to many he is recognised as a has-been and a failure. Seriously, what is this series best known for at this point for those who don't actually play it? It's a mixture of being good in the 90s, Sonic 06, and the Hedgehog. 2/3 of its most recognisable traits for things actually in the games are easily mocked. And to those who do follow the franchise, he's recognisable in about 50 different bloody configurations. For a series that at its core is about a hedgehog who runs very fast, between comics, cartoons, anime, and most importantly the games, this series has had tons of different gameplay styles, gimmicks, playable characters, tone, story presentation, framings, and more. It's always shifting. It's not just in spin-offs like the Rush series, advanced titles, and that one BioWare title as well. In main series entries, it appropriately enough cannot sit still. And that's a bloody thing as well. What is mainline? This series changes titles every title. I mean, I do know what is, but that's because I've been playing them. How does this mess of names look to someone who doesn't? There's a 3-part series by a bloke called Shame that goes into this point far more in depth than I will, but the point is essentially, if you go beyond surface level jokes about the series being crap, there is an absolute ton to pick apart in here. It is a highly experimental series, yet it is also one of the most well known, and that is fascinating to me. And it's perhaps just always going to be remembered for 06, which, I will say, I've made videos on games far less entertaining than that one, and even within its own series, Shadow is worse. It just so happens to be far less funny so fewer people care, and that's fair enough. So, as for me, I'm certain I can thank the Blue Bastard for my appreciation for jank. The classic trilogy are fun, well-made titles, one being a bit experimental, and the worst entry, and my favourite. Didn't even have the spin dash yet, which is a bit weird to go back to, but it works well enough without it, even if I do miss it from time to time. I'm not just being contrarian for the sake of it genuinely is. 2 and 3 and K tend to take people's favourite spots, not just in the classic trilogy, but in the series overall. I'm about to repeat what a lot of other YouTubers have said, but what Sonic brought to the table was satisfying momentum and physics. Sonic's speed was earned by using the level design, rolling down hills and bouncing off of springs for instance, gave you a ton of speed, and maintaining that through the stages felt skillful. Sonic 2 played heavily into this sense of speed very well while still having a good amount of platforming and exploration. The momentum also played into that platforming a lot more in 2 and 3 and K, taking a ton of speed up a hill turned potentially any section of stage into a ramp to be used. 3 and K also gave 3 playable characters and made the stages even more exploration heavy. Sonic and Knuckles even had different routes and thus experienced a slightly different game. 3 and K also introduced a very light story delivered entirely through actions and images, no dialogue, either text or spoken. And who could have guessed the next era would go very hard on story. The adventure games are what jumped them into 3D, and for the sake of time, I'm going to lump everything from Heroes to Sonic 06 in here as well. This is the era that I grew up with, so I do have nostalgia for it, I will throw that out there right now. Even in this loose era between 1998 and 2006, hub worlds came and went, stages went from open to corridor-like, an absolute ton of playable characters came and went, and there was one game in which Sonic wasn't even playable. I probably spent the most time playing this era of the franchise, despite its flaws. It's probably the least polished, and has aged dramatically. A lot of fans want Sega to have another crack at adventure gameplay. It's got what I'd call a healthier mix of genuine platforming and challenge mixed with spectacle than recent entries, and some would rather see this style polished up than the eventual solutions Sega came up with of boost gameplay. Also, the tone in this era was a roller coaster. Adventure 1 was pretty light, despite featuring at least one apocalypse. And then Adventure 2 had government cover-ups, threats of genocide, capital punishment, science run amok, a big chunk of the moon getting blown up, Sonic abandoning a likely staffed island to explode. It introduced and killed Shadow, and at this point, you should understand why I love this series to this day. I enjoyed it a lot more genuinely as a kid, but even now I can look back and appreciate the fact that it's fucking wild, especially since it was followed with Heroes, an entirely light-hearted affair with very minimal plot and 12 playable characters. It's got some amazing whiplash. And the only question this game really raises is, hey, why are you still alive? And that is answered in Shadow the Hedgehog, and make that 2 cases of whiplash. When Earth is invaded by aliens, their leader Black Doom seeks out Shadow, asking him for 7 Chaos Emeralds in exchange for his memories. So Shadow sets off on several possible adventures of various moral alignment. What's funny is, Adventure 2 is genuinely darker in its subject matter, but this one is edgy. Shadow is embarrassing in how dark it wants to be, while Adventure 2 honestly didn't make that big a deal of it. Then we have 06, which is a well-written Final Fantasy game. Okay, joking aside, it's taken a step back from Shadow and SA2 in darkness. It's a lot more like Adventure 1 with ancient gods and jumping in time to deliver story. However, it goes a bit nuts with it, and the main characters are not great with the implications of time travel. There's a reason this plot is mocked, and it is quite funny to watch. Besides multiple playable characters, this part of the series also had a lot of multiple stories and perspectives. Adventure 1 and 2, Sonic 06, and to some extent Heroes, showed you a single story from different viewpoints, and only through playing them all did you get the full picture. This came with downsides. Adventure, and to an awful extent Heroes, repeated stages so that each character had a meaningful amount of gameplay. Shadow instead used branching story paths. However, in the end only one story mattered. You just had to finish 5 others twice to get there. Now we reach boost gameplay, which I'm going to give the most focus, partly because this video leads into Forces, and this is the era it belongs to. I have generally liked boost gameplay, but I can't claim that it's not shallow. Getting good times in each entry feels more like playing a rhythm game without rhythm than a platformer. You learn the rough timing and order you need to do things, and then you do them, and it's through spectacle, nice scenery, and shaving seconds off that I'm rewarded. I mean, then you get into proper speedrunning and people are just jumping through half of the stage. But, you know, I'm talking about the intended route. Unleashed's boost gameplay was a good start, but was very much finding its feet. Many of the stages had a little in the way of alternative routes, only a handful opened up all that much, and without modding a PC copy of Generations, you're going to have slowdown. Plus a majority of the game is spent in a not very good beat 'em up. It's not bad, but it isn't good either. Another downside of boost gameplay is, you have to make very large stages that will be beaten very quickly, and that's going to cost a pretty penny. So boost gameplay tends to come with a secondary gameplay style to pad out the game's length. Colors was a bit more warmly received, its gameplay centered around wisps. It's incredibly heavy on 2D and the platforming is very simplistic. The wisps, however, do prop up gameplay a bit, giving Sonic extra abilities that can let him navigate different routes in the stages and shortcut his way through others. The 3D parts of the game are incredibly minor and very rarely have any actual platforming to be done in them. The boost was also given over to wisp capsules rather than rings. It had a far smaller focus on speed overall. Colors is also where the writing duties switched hands to a couple of blokes who wrote Happy Tree Friends and Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures. Suffice to say the tone is a lot lighter, Sonic is a lot more snarky, and there are no more government cover-ups. Unleashed was the last game until now to have a plot of such a large scale. Generations brought back boost gameplay and improved upon it dramatically. Stages now had a lot more optional routes and their own gimmicks to set them apart. However, they still felt quite samey in places. Generations is also a big nostalgia title, to the extent of having 2 playable Sonics, one of them modelled after classic Sonic. It's fine, the physics are nowhere near similar, but the stages work with him, and I guess how brutally overpowered his spin dash is makes up for that issue. I'm skipping Boom, but Lost World is an interesting case. Lost World is utterly different and, to me, utterly boring. It tries very hard not to be. It brought back wisps, for some reason, and didn't do anything with them, for some reason. It really wants to be Mario Galaxy, and doesn't do very good at it. So, the boost era has been at least consistently okay. I would not want all platformers to be aspiring after this, and I'm sure everyone else feels the same way, but it does give Sonic his own identity of sorts, and I enjoy it when it comes around. However, boost gameplay has always come with a cost-saving measure, since its stages are huge yet not very long. The stages also have a harder time setting themselves apart from one another. Generations so far has done it best. But a lot of boost gameplay depends on repeated set pieces with different backgrounds. I'll get more into this as we play Forces, since it too is guilty of this. Tone-wise, its lighter writing means that it was basically impossible for another Shadow the Hedgehog to happen, which is probably better for the series' image overall, but far less entertaining for the masses. So, essentially, I have played this series since I was a kid, and I'm going to keep following it. I'm not blind to the fact there is a lot of crap in here, however. I will, however, say that Sonic has had good releases up until recently. I like boost gameplay, and here and there, I do like adventure gameplay, often in spite of itself. So, I do enjoy 3D Sonic. Its weirdness and experimentation through the years keep a person like me watching to see what the hell they're gonna try next. Fishing and Adventure, Guns in Shadow, 3 character teams in Heroes, the Werehog in Unleashed, classic Sonic in Generations, and thanks to Mania, possibly, it's hard to tell, he's here as well, though he feels a little bit crowbarred in, and granted now he's called Other Sonic.
I'll take Sonic, I mean the other Sonic with me.
Because he's from another dimension instead of the past. He just happens to be classic Sonic, and handle worse than in Generations, and much worse than in Mania. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, join me when I cover Sonic Forces.